All right, folks, we're about to get started. Thanks so much to everyone who came out here, and thanks to everyone who's watching on the live stream at home. So let me first introduce our two speakers. Right here, we've got Dee, who is a former middle school teacher and still works as an educator, working with young people and using games to help them expand their minds and social skills. They are particularly focused on advocacy when it comes to queer youth and education for queer youth, particularly for ACE and ARO youth. They also like to correct me. And right here, we've got Cody Daigle-Orians, also known as the internet's ACE Dad. They created that ACE Dad Advice as a social media endeavor to help be a resource and an educator for ACE and ACE people of all ages, but particularly young people, and wrote I Am ACE to educate young people on asexuality and commonly asked questions, as well as to discuss his own journey to discovering asexuality. And we're really thrilled to have him here today. Also in the room, you may see a couple of excellent, helpful servers, Nick and Caitlin, who will be here to help you out if you want to order food, and Trayvon, our busser. And if you need anything, just raise a hand, and somebody will be right over to help you out. And so the two of them are going to speak for a little while about the book, and then there'll be some Q&A. So let's get ready, and I think this will be a really fun evening.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. Hope everyone in our audience is doing well as well.
Yeah.
Alright. So obviously the core conceit of your book is kind of talking about figuring it all out, coming to terms with identity, understanding identity, and getting to that first resource of figuring out that this is an identity that I can have. So just in your own personal experience, what resources did you use in finding your books? I know you mentioned Tumblr a bit in the book, but is there anything else?
So I am a late bloomer when it comes to being ACE. I first came out as gay when I was 18, and that was kind of what I understood myself to be. And that was like in 1994, so, like 1994s, remember that year? We had like AOL. So I didn't have access to any kind of ACE resources at all. And I spent most of my adult life just sort of understanding myself as like a broken gay person. It wasn't until I'd been married to my husband, Neil, for a few years. Neil is a good bit younger than me. He's a millennial, and he was like, you get on Tumblr to find something to do to stop bugging me while I'm trying to make art. She said, Tumblr, go to Tumblr. And it was on Tumblr, where I was spending time on the queer side of Tumblr, where I was encountering these posts about asexuality, and not just sort of information about being ace, but people talking about their experience of it and how they inhabited aces. And I was recognizing my own experience in those posts. And so that was, for me, the beginning of that process of figuring it out. And I'm the kind of person who, once I flash on an idea, I want to read everything there is. So that was the next thing. I had to go find books. And if you know, there were no books. I found Julie Sandra Decker's book, The Invisible Orientation. And that was the book that I spent time with. And it was a very affirming resource for me. And helped me understand myself more completely. So this entire process in the creation of this book has been a lot about trying to fill that gap for other people, so they don't have to take the same complicated path that there might be easily accessible resources for them.
Absolutely. I know for me, I was very not online. Despite the fact that I had all of the internet at my fingertips. And it took me meeting another ACE person, hanging out with them for quite a long time, and then finally, 5 minutes before they graduated from college, and potentially I never saw them again in my life, I went, hey, so we talk about this ACE stuff. So how did you find that community, and how did the community help you with your journey?
Well, for a large part of my first, I would say like the first 3 or 4 years of being an ACE person, I didn't have any ACE community. I just had my people that were around me. I had my husband, I had my friends, but none of them were ACE. I'm in a polyamorous relationship, so I have 3 other partners. I'm just surrounded by aloes everywhere. Just surrounded by them. It really wasn't until I started doing ACEDAT that I started to connect with other ACE people in the digital space. Like that project allowed me to find community because I wasn't really finding it where I was. There wasn't any. We didn't have ACE meetups in Connecticut where I lived for a long time. You know, there's no where do you go to where the other ACE people at? Where they at?
You can't just go down to the local ACE bar.
You can go down to the ACE bar. Exactly. So for me, it was online. That's where I found most of my community and building a thing that has kind of now become my every waking thought now. Like I'm making videos. So.
Are there any particular standouts in that community and in that online space that really helped you with processing your ACE identity?
I'm thinking of like people like I was doing the work at that time, but people like Sharonda J. Brown reading their work, Angela Chen, of course, all of her work. But I think of content creators like Ashabi, who's Acing Grace on Instagram. Her content is wonderful, and the work that they do is amazing. There's like a ton that I could list, but sort of everybody who's working in that space of creating content was really helpful. And I think particularly because so much of what they're doing is not just presenting information, but also sort of sharing their life experience, and you're getting to understand not just what ACE is, but how ACE is lived. And like that is reassuring. Yeah.
And I think that transitions well into talking about ACE advocacy, which is something that you kind of touch on in your book in some very important ways. One of the through lines that you mentioned a few times in your book is lack of ACE figures in our lives, not just in books and TV and movies, but also celebrities, neighbors, and teachers was a particular one that stood out to me as a former teacher. Role models that we can see and that youth can see and relate to. And you talk about how just being a role model, just being out, can be a form of activism in a way. And are there other small actions like that that can have big impacts on ACE youth or ACE folks who are still figuring that stuff out?
And absolutely, I think just the act of living openly, and it doesn't necessarily have to be openly in the way that like I am open about my asexuality on the internet for literally every person to see. I think it can also just mean being open with the people in your immediate circle and in your lives. You know, I think it's wonderful that there's more ACE representation in media. We're seeing more ACE characters, but there is something particularly powerful about just knowing ACE people and seeing us in the world, living our lives, inhabiting simple jobs, being teachers, being the person who's at the retail store, being the person who is your neighbor. That is an incredibly powerful kind of activism. It helps people see that we're not just an idea, we're a living person living a life. And so I think for any of us who are ACE, just demonstrating our lives to the people that we share them with is helping tell the story about what it means to be ACE, and that's an important bit of activism.
I had a bit of an experience when I first went into teaching where I was interning and I was very much not out. It was not the kind of place where I felt comfortable being out. And I was sitting in the office one day, and one of the other teachers in the office is gossiping about another teacher and goes, I think they might be, androgynous. And I was like, I don't think you know what that means. What do you mean by that? And they're like, well, they're just not really interested in relationships. And me sitting there in all of my aero-based glory, completely positive, goes, I think you mean asexual. Didn't get into the aero side of that at all, was just going for the basics. And they go, no, I'm pretty sure I mean androgynous. And I think about the fact that, that is, in retrospect, a wild experience that is, in many ways, very funny story to tell. But this person had students in their classes. They were teaching year in, year out, and didn't have even the basics of a lot of queer identities. What can we do as normal people in these spaces to help make sure that our ACE youth are supported and to maybe even do some stuff to educate those people who aren't us?
Well, I think you hit, that's a very important point. In order to create safe space for young people, we can assume the responsibility of trying to educate the adults who are also holding space for young people as well. We can shoulder that burden so a student doesn't have to. I taught for a long time too. I taught theater for about 10 years. I was a high school teacher. Yeah, theater. I mean, of course I do.
Yeah.
And I was an out. So I taught in Louisiana. That's where I'm originally from. And I was an out high school teacher in Louisiana, which was very, very brave.
That is incredibly impressive.
We're dumb. I was dumb. But I certainly through that experience, just simply kind of living my life, not necessarily bringing that into the classroom in a specific way, but just being an out person, I would talk about my boyfriend, or what did you do weekend? My boyfriend and I did this, and that would be where that conversation ended. Just sort of demonstrating that, inhabiting your life, and I think that inhabiting your life, but also not being ashamed of it in any way, creates a space for a young person to also not feel ashamed about themselves or feel like it's a safe space to be. And then if we can shepherd the adults who need to learn what androgynous actually is, if we can sort of shepherd those relationships and help teach them where they're open to being taught, we're creating safer spaces for young people.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on that the part where you were like, or maybe very dumb, and I'd like to kind of focus back on the later thing you said about that gave those kids the space to have an example. So maybe it wasn't the safest thing, but I hardly can believe it was a bad idea.
I totally agree. It was a good thing. It was definitely a good thing. Especially, I had the theater kids who already were mostly the outsider kids anyway, and we wanted to create a space where they could be themselves and live their weird creative dreams as best that they can. Maybe not the best thing for me having to have conversations with my principals about parent conversations about me, but good for students for sure.
Yeah, and of course we do need to make sure that we're keeping ourselves safe in all of this as well, and taking what steps we need to take to be secure. I wasn't out while I was teaching, and a large part of that was because my administration didn't understand what pronouns were. And once I can't explain that, why do I explain the next thing or the next thing or the next thing?
Well, you can't really do that work if you're not safe. You don't have the space to be a good role model either. And I get that.
Yeah. And I'm going to circle back around to something we started to talk about earlier, which is you mentioned that we've got more books now. Our representation is getting a little better. How are we doing on that? Can we help get it even further?
You know, we're doing okay. Yeah, we're doing okay. I think what I really like about, especially sort of in the book side now, the nonfiction side, because like my book came out, there's also the Soundscape OK book, the Ace and Arrow Journeys book, there's Ace Voices that's out, John J. Brown's Refusing Compulsory Sexuality. Like, there's all these books that are out talking about the Ace and the Arrow experience. What I appreciate most about them is that they're work created by Ace and Arrow people. And I think that's like really important. Representation is great. You know, it's great to have like a character like Todd on BoJack Horseman. But it is more important that we have like depiction, that's just depiction. Representation is when we get to tell our own stories, and we get to create the work that communicates what our experience is. And I think that's the valuable thing about these books that exist now. Now, on the shelf, there are more books you can choose with ace people talking about aceness. And having read them, we're all talking about the same thing, but in different ways, and there are really great bits of things that like Ace and Arrow Journeys illuminates that I don't talk about in my book. So you get a much broader picture of what we are like through all of them, and I think it's enormously valuable. There's still a long way to go.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I think that part of it is having both, because I think having our own voices in the space is very key, but also having those louder voices who maybe don't have to protect themselves as much in talking about us, kind of being there and boosting us up is really, really helpful as well.
Yeah, like there's no one way to win a battle. Like you have to have lots of different tactics and lots of different ways.
Yeah.
And that's super helpful.
And sometimes I like just reading a fantasy book and being like, oh, they made this tertiary character called Ace. And that's amazing. It's just casually there.
Yeah, so there's, it's coming out this fall in October. I was invited to write an introduction for a YA anthology of speculative fiction Ace stories by Ace writers. And I got to read all the stories. And it was so satisfying and so fulfilling to read, like, not like, so here's what asexuality is, but reading like, I'm an ace person on a spaceship flying, and we're gonna have this grand adventure in space. That's amazing. I'm so excited that those kind of things are existing too. That it's not just about educating about our experience or handling the 101, but also expanding us into dreaming us into all kinds of possibilities, and that's a blast.
It's writing fiction for us, not
Yes.
just about us.
Yeah, and it's all Ace and Arrow writers. It's again telling our own story or putting us into the world in really cool ways. It's wonderful.
When did you say it's coming out again?
I think it's October. October. I should pay more attention to it. But I think it's October. It's called Being Ace.
Excellent. Time is an illusion anyways. We've talked a bit about that need to take care of ourselves in this space. And one of the main parts of your book that really strongly stuck with me was your description of carrying the broken shards of our ability past with us. The fact that it's not this figuring out that you're ace due to all of these outside factors is usually not this easy breezy journal. It's something that leaves us with these scars. And we can't just put it down and leave past us behind. And you talked a bit about the fact that you still have moments of feeling broken, which, yeah, that's weird. And how, in that context, how do we take care of ourselves and how do we take care of each other in dealing that way?
How do we take care of ourselves? I mean, I'm still learning how to do that for myself. I often talk about ASAP as though he's another person. You know, like, I have days where I'm like, I wish his dad were here right now to help me out because he knows things that I don't, and he's way smarter, and he's got it together in a way that I do not. I think that like the most important thing is, one of the most important things is to not hold ourselves responsible for having a hard time. The world is designed to tell us again and again that who we are and what we want is wrong, is broken. The world is designed to do that. And so it should come as no surprise that sometimes we will think that and we'll carry that. And to give ourselves grace to sometimes have a bad day. You're going to have a day where it's going to be really hard. You're going to have another day where it won't be bad. Give yourself grace in the hard day, and just take care of that person, because the strong version of you will pick up the slack later. To sort of expect ourselves to always have it together, I think just in general, what a wild idea. Who's got it? If you have it together all the time, bless you. I wish I had your skill set.
Write a book, please. Write a book, please.
Right, exactly.
Teach me how.
Well, and I think too, like that, we're all not going to be having a bad day at the same time. So when you are having that bad day, you can turn to your community, to the people who aren't. So on the days that I'm not having a bad day, I got you. Swing by Instagram or wherever, I got you on those days. And then on the days when I'm having a lousy one, someone's got me. And that is, I've been thinking a lot about the notion of care. I think we spend a lot of time just sort of like talking about like loving each other, or like how love is important. But I feel like care is the more important thing. Care is like love turned into action. And we can love someone, but it's different to care for them. And now it feels enormously important to me, as the world is becoming a nightmare place, that we focus on care. Care for ourselves, but also care for each other. When the other person in my community is having a hard time, I need to take care of them. And if we extended that care to each other, we would get it in return.
I have a friend who, this is more on the trans side of my identity for sure, but they have a policy of, if you're ever having a day when you doubt yourself, text me, and I will just remind you, yes, you are trans enough. And that's such a little act of care that is so easy to give and has saved me no small number of times from a bad day turning into a worse day. And I think you're never going to not have the bad days, but finding ways to make sure the bad days stay on that mid-level and don't plummet into the depths is a big part of it as well.
I love that. That's like a beautiful thing. What a wonderful friend.
Yes, they are amazing. And they're one of the folks who really helped me with figuring out my identity. And they don't do it in the same social media way as we do, but they very much have that trans dad energy going on.
Well, what I love about that too is also makes me think about the importance of small action. You don't have to become ASAP on the internet in order to profoundly impact other people in your community. A simple text message can sometimes be as powerful an action as launching a whole platform of something to educate the masses. That's equally as valuable and equally as important.
And I think that simple text message has that potential to grow, because I've now had similar conversations with a couple of folks who were figuring out their stuff, and I've offered that same thing to them. And if that continues to grow and go forward, that right there has huge impact in all of these tiny dots.
That's a t-shirt, like a t-shirt.
Oh yeah.
I love that, yeah.
There's a lot of things that I later realized is There's also I hesitate to call this, but a scene in your book where you're talking about, you kind of break out a little bit and talk about the act of writing and that conversation that you had with your, sorry, what do you call your?
Oh yeah, the constellation.
The constellation, yeah. With your constellation about breaking out of norms, and it talks about taking that leap away from the harm of norms, but it very quickly morphs into taking the leap towards joy, which was an absolutely gorgeous shift. Do you have any advice in finding that joy and taking that leap?
So I feel like the first leap is the hard one. Like once taking that first step outside and claiming something that is outside of the norm or something that is not expected of you is the really hard one. But I feel like that if you sort of, my husband Neil says this all the time, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. So there are the things that once you see it, then there's no way of unseeing it. You will always go through the world and see that thing as like BS. So you'll see the norms as BS. So once you get to the point where you just can't not see it. Just take the leap. Just take that step into the next thing, even if it's scary, even if it's hard. Take it, because every leap after is a lot easier. And once you are able, I don't know the secret of making that first step. I guess I've always been kind of like just a big oaf of a person, going like, all right, let's go, and just taking big dumb risks. But I think once that first one is there and you survive that step, then every other leap becomes easy. You can leap into a different relationship structure. You can leap into a further exploration of who you are. I came out as non-binary like 3 weeks ago, and but like I don't know what that is going to mean exactly. I just know that that's what's true. So it's like, let's go, let's dive and go.
You've taken that first step, but there's a lot more still to
There's
take.
so much more to go, and that's probably, I think people fear taking a step because they don't know all the answers on the other side. And I think there is something very beautiful about not knowing. There is something beautiful about the question. And taking the leap and moving into a place where you're going to figure things out. And maybe you don't know all the details, but that's a beautiful place to be. It's exploration, it's curiosity. You're going to find the answers. You maybe won't have them now, but you'll find them.
I think I've heard, I have no memory of where this is from, but I've heard this talked about as kind of a space of, not a space of uncertainty, but a space of infinite possibility. And the ability to take that step out into a space where you don't exactly know where you are, what you're doing yet, but you have so much to explore there. And I think sometimes just taking that first step into uncertainty is what really gets you into figuring a lot of stuff out.
Yeah, and but I can get that many possibilities is scary.
Oh yeah, it's terrible.
It's terrifying. but like, what a beautiful thing. And I think too, because I'm queer in a lot of ways, so but that space of question for me feels like it defines my queerness. That I am most queer when I don't know what's up, and I'm figuring it out. I feel like boxes are the tools of norms. They want to put you in a box, they want to define things, they want to put clear fences around what you are. Queerness is the space to go like, what? It's a big messy space. It's a big messy space with a lot of possibilities. You could be a lot of things, you could not know. That's like a fun queer space to be.
But even within that space, it's very helpful to have words that help you acknowledge that your experience is shared.
Mm-hmm.
It's not putting yourself in a box, but it's finding other people who are in that same section of weirdness as you.
Well, I think like to keep it weird.
Yes, let's.
Appreciating that language is fluid. That if you can pick a word, like labels are tools, not tests.
Yes.
You know, they aren't defining us. They're explaining what's happening right now. I may pick up a different word later. Maybe there are 4 words I'm going to pick up later because we have a lot of words. We got a lot of them. Yeah, like have that fluidity of the language too. It doesn't have to stay forever.
Yeah, I have never felt very attached to micro-labels because I like the fact that the broad words give me that flexibility and that space. And like I absolutely respect that micro-labels are great for other people. I'm not trying to diss on them here. But for me, living in that uncertainty is both absolutely terrifying and absolutely wonderful at the same time. My therapist at one point pointed out to me that anxiety is chemically in your body very similar to excitement. That you have very similar reactions, and it's your mental context that changes whether you feel good about that or bad about that. And I think that feels very similar to how my ACE experience has been, where the uncertainty feels both good and bad depending.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I totally. Yeah, I'm still kind of reeling from like anxiety. I even think about my anxiety as excitement. I can be excited all the time. What a mind-expanding possibility. Yeah, but I would say that my ACE experience, I feel very similar. It's been both great and also terrifying. And I'm having that experience around being non-binary too, where it's both incredibly exciting to me, but I'm experiencing new kinds of anxieties and terrors at the same time that I didn't before. And what a weird place to be.
It's all a part of growth, and sometimes growth can feel kind of sucky in the midpoint. If I may be very technical.
Sucky in the midpoint.
Yeah.
That's
Scientific term.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the next one.
Excellent. Yes, I would not expect that. That's the like ACE 102 as opposed to 101.
Exactly. Yeah.
201. I don't remember how
And it'll never be finished. That'll be the thing. It'll just be an unfinished book that you can complete the rest of it. Save you some time.
And I think pretty soon we're going to be shifting into Q&A, but we've talked a bit about some various ACE media and a few books. If you had to pick just one aside from your own that everyone should read, fiction, non-fiction, anything like that.
Can I pick 2?
Fine, all of it.
So I would certainly recommend, like Angela Chen's Ace was a really revelatory book for me. Mostly because it was for me the first time I was encountering someone talking about asexuality outside of the 101. And it was placing it in a cultural and political context, which was I thought was a really helpful thing. The other, and it's beyond compulsory sexuality. I think Sharonda's book is magnificent and incredibly important because as a Black asexual person, that is not represented in the work that we have that exists, and so it's very important that is there because it's an important perspective for us to have and to center.
Yeah, it's a voice that we don't get to hear nearly as much.
And more. And there's also, I want another book from Sharonda. I want all the books from Sharonda because it's a wonderful book.
I think, shall we shift over to an open Q&A? And see our staff member running across the room to get the mic.
Okay, so if you've been here before, you know the drill. If you've got a question, raise your hand and I will run the mic over to you and you will be able to ask your question. than be heard, which is good.
I was just wondering about your experience with being ace in a polyamorous relationship.
Ooh. In general, it's been a very positive experience. I came out as ace during the time I was married to my husband. So he thought he married an owl person. Not so. So the hardest part actually was the two of us navigating that change. We really had to, in many ways, renegotiate sort of the understanding of our relationship because I now had a new understanding of myself. But we have been incredibly lucky to have brought into our lives and our relationship two other spectacular human beings who are kind and thoughtful and know us as ourselves. We call it the constellation because my partner Scott is an astrophysicist, and we just think that's it's gross. But it's cute. And it requires a lot of conversation, but like every relationship does. But it requires a lot of talking. A lot of us talking about what we want, where we are, what we're feeling, and it's just understood that in my two relationships that are in this constellation, I'm in a romantic relationship with two people. There's just an understanding that we're not just moving my aceness toward your allowness. Like, my aceness gets its space. It gets the same respect as your allo needs and wants. Like, mine have space too. The things that I want, the way that I want to be in this relationship has equal weight. And we're not just constantly trying to make me more allo. Because good luck. It's not happening. And that, I think, is the most important thing. Making sure that you're holding space for what you want. That we are not, polyamory is hard. It's hard to be in a relationship with an owl person who's an ace person. But knowing that you have a right to ask for what you want, knowing that you have a right to want and need the things that you want and need, and articulating that to the people you're in a relationship with, and they're respecting that, things can work out. Yeah. And a lot of talking, just an insane amount of talking.
It seems like finding people who are willing to respect that and who are able to.
Yes.
So I have recently realized I'm a lot more sex favorable than I originally thought I was. And I'm getting a lot of, as I talk to my friends, well-meaningly, I talk to my friends in chosen family, and I explain my experiences. They're like, yeah, girl, that ain't ace. And it is, I still feel that way. So I just want to ask, how do you navigate kind of talking to your friends about being more sex favorable in the ace community, but not give them an entire TED talk about the intricacies of it?
Well, I think sometimes you have to give them the TED talk. Sometimes it's just necessary. I think the important thing is feeling like you have the space to sort of say, this is the way you're going to interact with me. You don't get to say that. Because that thing that you're saying when you think it's funny, it's not really a joke to me. That makes me feel a certain way. That makes me feel less than myself. It makes me feel like you're not acknowledging the fullness of my being. So that's not going to work. I think we are so conditioned to apologize for our aceness or make it small. And we don't have to do that. We can demand the same kind of respect that they are demanding from us to sort of put up with their nonsense. You know? We can ask for the same thing, and just sort of giving yourself permission to say, that's not going to be acceptable to me. This is the way I want you to do that. If you want to have a conversation about why, we can do that. Here's the TED Talk. PowerPoint. And then they go, but like, give yourself permission to say, no, that joke isn't funny, and that's not, this is what's true.
All right. Hi, Cody. We have a question from online. I'm on the other side of the wall.
Having a moment.
So, hi, Cody. This question comes from K.M. Kastner, who's watching from YouTube. Cody, what is your advice for feeling insecure about being behind, quote unquote, in figuring out identity or finding a relationship, especially for older aces?
There is no such thing as being behind for anyone. That does not exist. There are cultural expectations for us to hit certain markers at certain times, but that's it. Those are cultural expectations. Where you are in your life is where you are supposed to be. If you want to be someplace different, then you can go there, but you're not behind. You are where you're supposed to be. Those kind of markers are completely arbitrary, and they're just designed to make you a useful person to like a grossly capitalist society. We don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. We can just go follow our bliss and do the thing that makes sense for us in our own time. If I worried that figuring out my aceness at 42 was putting me behind, well, I would be sitting at home like eating ice cream being sad right now instead of doing this. But you know, figuring myself out at 42, that was the right time. That was the right time for me. Yeah, not the right time doesn't exist.
So obviously you travel around the country, you met a lot of ace individuals in person. But what I can tell by online, there seems to be a lot of anxiety about being ace. If you look on Reddit, almost the majority of the posts are, am I actually ace, or questioning themselves. Does it seem to be in person that people are optimistic and what are seeing online, for instance?
I would say that my in-person experiences feel the same to online. I do think you're right. Like I do see a lot of people being very anxious about being ace, not wanting to, or not feeling like they have the ability to claim that, like that we have to dismiss all the other possibilities first, it feels sort of the same to me. And I certainly, if there's one thing that I try to communicate in my work as much as I possibly can, it's that we have, every one of us, no matter what our identities, our experiences are, we have the right to claim what's happening to us, because no one knows what's happening to us better than us. Like, I'm living in my body and in my brain. I know better than anybody what's going on. And if I say that I'm ace, I don't have to prove that to anybody. That's what's true for me. Could I decide something different is true later? Absolutely. But I have every right to claim what's true for myself. And everyone does. And I try my best to encourage everyone who is feeling like they can't do that to do that. But yeah, it feels equally true in person.
I think sometimes that anxiety is looking for affirmation in a world that doesn't have it. And sometimes those questions are a way to seek out that community and that confirmation.
Yeah, like it is. I feel like it's rare to see people claiming their aces so proudly and clearly. You know, like I'm ace, that's it, no questions. But we're sort of conditioned on other ways to get there. Yeah.
Do you have any kind of advice as far as the kind of dealing with the stigma and the basically being ostracized between the rest of society, between another thing that kind of like separates you from the rest of the world? You get it, okay, great. Okay, you're polyamorous, okay, not so great, and more further away, okay. Now you're asexual, okay. Now you're non-binary, okay. So each one of those things puts up a barrier between more likely to be looked down upon or looked differently or looked separated from other people. How do you kind of keep the confidence every time you make each one of these discoveries, just continue being who you are?
Well, I see all those things very specifically, not as something that is happening to other people. Those are things that are happening to me. So for me, those are all liberating things. Those are opening me up to myself in a more clear way, understanding myself more truly, more honestly and completely. So what other people think of that is none of my business. If someone thinks it's weird that I'm ace and polyamorous, this happens a lot. People's heads explode when I explain that I have multiple partners, and they're like, "What's your ace?" I have people tell me, "I feel sorry for your husband because, right?" And it's like, my husband's really lucky. Let's just be clear. My husband, story. All of those things aren't putting barriers between me and other people. They're opening me up, and the people who don't want to be on this ride don't need to be here, and I don't got to worry about them. But the people who are willing to be here for all of these different things, wonderful. Those are my people. That's my community. That's what matters. All that other stuff, it's none of my business. I'll just block and delete. I don't have to worry about that. Woo!
It does make the TED Talk a bit longer, though.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Yeah.
One last question? Okay.
So as a fellow theater artist and theater person, I'm just curious from speaking generally how creativity and play maybe influence part of this writing process, if at all, and how it infuses your constellation interaction.
Really good question. So theater-wise, I was mostly a playwright. So yeah. Very handy to have that experience. But I think that what I take away most from my theater experience is mostly the comfort and willingness to sort of look at what's truly inside and sharing that. And being comfortable to share that as authentically as possible without performance so much. And I call on that in my work all the time. And it's also true at home too. Sometimes the things that I have to say are hard, and sometimes the things I have to say are not necessarily going to be well received by the person who's going to hear them. But it is important for me to be as authentic as possible and as truthful as possible, and should be in the moment and be present as much as possible. And I try to do that in the book. I try to do that in my work. Do I succeed all the time in life? No. I can be passive aggressive. Sometimes, yeah, terrible. But yeah, I feel like that's where I hold on to my theater training the most.
Okay, so with that, first let's give another round of applause for and now it is time to go get copies of the books and get them signed, if you would like.
Where can people at home get the book?
If people are watching from home, you can get the book from any Busboys and Poets location, because Busboys and Poets actually has picked this as one of our spring books to go titles, which means that we have them at every single location. Bookshop.org, which is an awesome nonprofit that supports independent bookstores. Excellent. Anyway, so if you're watching from home, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed it. Otherwise, if you want to pick up a copy of I Am Ace or a couple of other of the Ace books we've got in store, we've also got both Ace and Refusing Compulsory Sexuality out on the shelves if you want to get those. And thanks so much for being here.